Welcome back to the Budding Author Podcast with me, Simon Ward, your host. Today, our guest is Kolby Granville from After Dinner Conversation, monthly publication. How you doing, Kolby?
I'm doing great. Thanks for hosting me.
It's good, mate. Good to have you here. The magazine's very much about short stories. So tell us what we should look for in a short story. If we're writing a short story, what's the key pointers for us?
So that's a great question. So short stories, and this is maybe my own bias. So our magazine, to be clear, is short stories, short fiction, with a focus on typically some sort of ethical or philosophical question. So if you imagine if the trolley problem was written by Kurt Vonnegut as a short story, that's kind of what we're looking for. Um, so short stories, in my opinion, we go to school and they give us these 1800s short stories because the copyright has expired on them. And they can, reprint them and pass them around without getting the author's permission. And they tell us that these are great short stories. And they are, but they are not very accessible short stories. And so they are often hard for a young reader to read and to really enjoy. They can be appreciated, but they're hard to enjoy. We're not going for just appreciation. We would like people to actually enjoy what they read. And so short stories, modern short stories, in my opinion, are a bit different. They are, in my opinion, an idea written as succinctly and clearly and shortly as possible. Whereas in a novel, you might spend half a page describing the room. You might build these rich characters because, it's only 2 or 3 pages in a 300-page book to learn about these people. In a short story, every word, every word has to reveal character, forward the plot. And if it doesn't, you need to cut it. I would say almost universally, the longer a story submission is to us, the more likely it is bad. Um, so when we get a submission that's 7,500 words, we're thinking like, okay, so what do you have to say that required 75 words? Right? And usually the answer is nothing. Usually
Yeah.
the answer is you had about 3,000 words worth of material and you stretched it out to sound like Charles Dickens. Um, and that's just the way it is. There are exceptions to that where something is so interwoven and complicated and intricate that it requires, like, even in its shortest version, it requires more time. But that is rarely the case.
Yeah. I I looked at some after having a guest on, Laura Frost. She sort of reawoke my fascination for short stories, which was really good. And I looked at some submissions for short story competitions, and there's a story I'd written before for Readsy Readsy competition, and when I got to look at it, it was just short of 5,000 words.
Mhm.
And on the short story competition, it said 3,000. So I set about chopping and shortening it out, taking out and tightening it up, got it down to 3,000. And I was really impressed with myself, sort of getting it down to that. And
And you
then
likely
when I
ended
got
up
to
with a
the point,
better story for it.
yeah, well, when I got down to the point of submitting the story, it was
Yeah.
2,000 words, not 3,000. So I had
Yeah.
to take another 1,000 out. And it
Wow.
really sort of tests you. And I think,
Yeah.
as Laura Frost had said, it's good practice writing short stories for novels, because with a short story, you've got to get the attention quickly. You've got to keep
Mhm.
strong pace, and you don't get tied up too much in description, which perhaps with my writing, I'm not sort of, I would never write a whole page on description for anything. I like to sort of keep things moving, keep plenty of action, but you can go too far the other way, which maybe I'm guilty of on occasions. But how do you grab? What's the best way to grab in a short story to get people emotionally into that story? What's the best way to do that?
So I will tell you the secret to a good short story, and it shouldn't be a secret. It should be something everyone knows. After you've written the story that you want to write, start reading it from the beginning and ask yourself, if the reader started here, would the story still work? Would they
Yeah.
be confused? And what you will find is the first couple of pages of every short story could be cut.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, and we got one of these a little while ago where it's like John walked into a bar, the bar was gritty and dirty, and the bartender looked like he'd been in one too many fights, and he sat down and ordered a drink, but they didn't have that drink, so he ordered another drink, and he gave the man across the way an evil stare, and blah, blah. And it goes on for like 3 pages like this. And then at the 3-page mark, it says, and then he walked in. Okay, that's where the story started.
Yeah.
The story should have started with, and then he walked in. And we would have been fine doing the rest of it without the rest of it. That's how you really create a compelling short story.
That's good advice for novels as well, I think,
Oh, for
because
sure.
quite
Especially
quite
modern
often,
novels.
yeah, I think I've had positions like that before where the first 3-4 pages are sort of, there's nothing happening. And when I've been in writing groups, I look at people's writing and it's written well, but nothing happened.
Right. And I'm not saying don't write it. Absolutely write it, because from an author standpoint, it's helping you create the environment and the
Yeah.
mood and the world building. And so you might need that to sort of ease your way into this new creation. But then after you've written it, the reader doesn't need it. The reader
No.
will be able to infer it.
Yeah, I think, and then it's just little references, because
Mm-hmm.
if the character's parents passed away, is that relevant to the story? You might sort of want just give
Right.
slight reference to it, for example. And if he achieved great success in college basketball, we don't need to know who that was for. We don't
Right.
need to know what the score was. And I think that's the essence.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one of the better writing advice I got, and this was 20 years ago. I got this writing advice from someone. They said, I don't need to know everything when I read your story, but I do need to know that you know everything.
Yeah.
Right. I need to know, I need to be able to trust you with what you're telling me. But once I trust you, I don't need to know everything you know as the author.
Yeah. That's it. You can sort of just sort of hint that the
Mhm.
information's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. What's your story, Colby? How did you start off?
So I started off as I guess you could say, science fiction fan, and as a person who was generally disappointed with writing. I'm the weirdest literary magazine editor in chief you'll meet like that. That I found writing and books to be really pretty terrible growing up. And the reason they were pretty terrible is, imagine, I'll use a movie example. Imagine if somebody showed a 12 or 13-year-old the movie 2001 and said, or Citizen Kane or some great movie, and said, "Hey, just so you know, this is as good as it gets. This is the pinnacle of the genre."
Yeah.
And then as a kid, you think, man, if this is as good as it gets, what do the other things look like? Right? Like the rest of it must be terrible. And I think that we do that with books as well, is that we stick, uh, I'll use Charles Dickens as an example. We stick Charles Dickens in somebody's hand and say, this is as good as it gets. And it could be that whatever great book you hand someone is truly a great book, because it revolutionized the medium, it revolutionized the genre, it created a new tool for authors to use. It explored an underrepresented group that had never been represented before in
Yeah.
fiction. Uh, but that doesn't mean it's sort of objectively good to a modern reader, right? Um, and so it wasn't until a teacher stuck a copy of Kurt Vonnegut in my hand, and she said, "Look, this is not really in the curriculum, but people like it." And I
Mm.
and I just thought, wait a minute, if you can write like this, why are you writing like? Why is everyone else writing the other way? Um, and so then only later did I realize that there is really exciting, interesting writing out there. Um, it's just not the stuff that sort of the copyright has expired on.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people have changed though, haven't they? I think over the years, people's attention span is so much shorter than it was back in the day. So, and I think with books now, I get very frustrated with books if the pacing is not there.
Yeah.
With all my writing, I like to keep the pace going, and on occasions people are going like, "Hang on, well, where are they?" sort of thing on reviews, but sort of describing the room in detail, it takes me away sometimes from what's actually happening. So it's a balance, isn't it, between telling the reader where he is rather than letting them imagine where they are.
Mm.
And that's a
I
difficult
think,
balance, isn't it?
particularly in the case of short stories, I mean, to go back to your earlier thing, I agree with you. There's a difference between a great book and a good book,
Yeah.
right? A book can be a great book without being a very readable good book, and vice versa, right? There are books that are good that I just enjoy reading, and they're just trash, right? But they make me happy. And then you get that rare author who can do both.
Yeah.
Um, I think that for writing, my own opinion is, I think if you've ever seen sort of Asian art, whether it's Japanese or Chinese traditional art with the
Yeah.
black ink, um, you're seeing 15% of a scenery, a village in a mountainous area.
Yeah.
But what that 15, and I would encourage your listeners to do this after they are done listening to the podcast, but even with the 15% that's in black and white and ink, you know everything about what that village looks like,
Yeah.
because your brain has filled in your own personality and your own experience. And I think that's what good writing does, is
Yeah.
it creates the relevant outlines and allows your imagination to fill in the missing parts.
And the thing is that the whole point of reading rather than watching a movie is for your own creative mind to sort of imagine the
Yeah,
scenario and imagine the feelings and the emotion that sort of that's kept within that.
for sure. And of course, the author has the hard job of knowing what to include and what not to include to prompt you to fill in the right details
Yeah.
or have the right framework for the details you're filling in. One of the
Yeah.
writing exercises that I think is very useful um, for authors is to just uh, say, like, look, write in a short story or something, just a sentence using the word chair.
Yeah.
Okay, now take your description of the word chair and type it into Google search. Every chair that popped up in the image search is the chair your reader might be thinking of.
Yeah.
So if you just say he sat in a chair, it could be a plastic school chair, it could be a red chair, a blue chair, it could be a tall backed chair, it could be a reading chair, it could be whatever. So at that point, maybe you haven't given me enough, right? Because look at all of the versions that Google Images have given me for chair as you've described it. So maybe you want to steer, there's some purpose in the story in steering the reader to a certain result. And so
Yeah.
now let's say that I put in my writing, it is a yellow, tall backed chair, reading chair. And now
Yeah.
type into Google yellow, tall backed reading chair. And it'll
Yeah.
give you 1,000 chairs that meet that description. And you think, you know what? If the reader imagined any of these 1,000 pictures, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah. That's a good idea actually. I think some people may make the mistake the chair is not that relevant to the story, so I don't need to put too much description in for that.
And
But
it may not be, but it may be to set up to create a setting.
what I was thinking was just a small word about the chair could tell you what the
Correct.
room was like,
Yep.
give you an
And what it
idea of
does is
what
it,
kind of room it is. Yeah.
and that's exactly it. Is I think that you can use a single object to build out a room. So if I
Yeah.
told you that my character sat down in a yellow overstuffed reading chair, you don't just know what that chair roughly looks like. You know what the room that chair usually is in looks like.
Yeah. So
And
it
it becomes a symbol.
changed
It
that
becomes a
picture.
symbol for a larger thing that you don't have to tell me anymore.
No, that's very good. I think I mentioned to you just as a preview before the show
Yeah.
that I've got a challenge for you. But for this challenge, you need to roll a dice. So I'll roll a dice.
All right, roll the dice for me.
Roll a die to see which one you've got. So let's have a look. We got a 3.
All right,
So
what do we got?
3 is comedy.
Okay.
So
That's the
the
toughest
lion,
genre.
basically, it's what this is. It's a little game. We edit the lion. So we want to edit this lion to suit a comedy genre.
All right.
Ready?
I'm
The
ready to type
guy.
it. I'm gonna have to type it and then redo it.
Okay. The guy was so clumsy, he spilt my glass of Chardonnay as he handed it to me. So I was going to put down the comments, but I can't get it in the comments. I have to do some live shows, I think.
No, that's fine. Okay, so yeah, that's an easy fix.
So I'll give you a little minute to do that, and
Okay.
I'll just tell people a bit what's coming up next. We have a very, very special guest who's been on the Oprah Winfrey show. He's going to be coming to the show very soon. We've got Michelle Barker and David Griffin Brown, who's going to be coming next week. And we've got some good stuff. I was going to read a sample from one of my books, Time to Click. It's a psychological thriller, part of the Awakening series. So let me give me a page number, Kolby.
211.
211. I might give too much away on that one. Hang on. 211. Is this a bit I can get through? Where are we this? Okay. This is Ethan. Is having a bit of an argument with his girlfriend. Ethan attempted to put his hands on her shoulders, but she brushed him away. I fell in love with you because you were smart. Have you left your brain in a box somewhere? Oxo Tushy owns you. He'll not let you go anywhere. That's a little bit of excitement that's going on in that. Time to Click. Little bit of humour. Lots of thrill. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Link will be in the description if you want to have a look. How is Kolby doing?
Good.
Are we good to go?
Yeah. At least it wasn't. All right. This is probably a little bit overwritten, but I've got it for you.
Okay, so we started off with the guy was so clumsy he spilt my glass of Chardonnay as he handed it to me, and we wanted a comedy genre spin on that. So over to you, Kolby.
Okay, so what we've got is my bulbous-nosed uncle fumbled with his fat fingers around the slim wine glass, dropping it in my lap, stuttering as he did so. At least it wasn't good wine, as I jumped up.
That'll do, mate. That'll do. Very good. It's on the button, isn't it? There, sort of not much time to do it. I appreciate that.
It's tough.
Final question: How do we submit short stories to you? Because I might send you one of mine. What kind of story do you have?
I think that would be great. So the easiest way is through our website. We don't do Submittable because Submittable charges literary magazines $1,000 a year for the honor of being on Submittable. So you go to our website, afterdinnerconversation.com. There's a couple of important things, though. Number one is that, and I think every reputable literary magazine should do this, we provide a free sample magazine so that you can see the kind of things we publish. Yeah. I would definitely say download the free sample magazine and read a story or two. You might find that you're going to save yourself some time. You're going to save us some time. Additionally, we have once you go through the submission process, we have about a 3 or 4 minute video where I explain exactly the kind of story we're looking for.
Okay.
And so we encourage you to watch that as well. And the reason I do this is not because I don't want to read your writing. I do, but we have all volunteer readers. Last year in 2024, we got 1,300 submissions.
Oh.
And our volunteer readers had to read 1,300 submissions. And we have about a 3% acceptance rate. I would love us to have a 50% acceptance rate. And the way that we do that is for authors to read a little bit of our magazine, learn about what we do, and then to self-select a little bit so that, the things that we're getting, we're like, oh, this is exactly what we would publish. It's just not quite there. This is, and so I'd much rather read less that is more of what we do than more. And I'll just pitch this as my final statement here. I think authors often, particularly new authors, believe, well, if there's a 3% acceptance rate or a 5% acceptance rate, once I have submitted to 100 literary magazines, I will be accepted to 5 of them. And that is 100% not the way it goes, right? If I submit 100 pieces of poetry to 100 places that publish novels, my success rate is 0, right? But if I submit 100 pieces of poetry to 100 poetry magazines, I might have a pretty good chance. And so I think a lot of new authors think that spamming lots of submissions is a good way to go. And I think it actually does you more good to spend more time on the front end finding where you're a good fit. And then your odds of being selected might be 20 or 30 or 40% instead of 0%.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. I think I did read that for a lot of submissions for agents and for publishers, a lot of submissions get thrown out because they just haven't followed the guidelines for submission.
Yeah,
which is a shame. People are sort of so keen to share their stuff without sort of following the rules, as it were.
And I'll tell you why they get thrown out, because I always thought as a writer, I was like, oh, that's so stupid. If I wrote something good, you should read it. But and maybe you'll publish it if it's good. You'll publish it even if I didn't submit it correctly. And that's true. But what it really is saying is, I don't know anything about you, and so I'm very likely to be sending you something you want anyway.
Yeah.
And so by getting the submission guidelines wrong, it's not that that's the problem. It's that you probably haven't done other due diligence. That's the problem. And that's just indicative that you probably didn't.
Excellent. Kolby, this has been fantastic. Thanks for coming on the show. I will be checking out After Dinner Conversation and going through due diligence and following the process. And we look forward to seeing what you've got to say and that sort of thing on my work. There's one I've got in mind actually, which I don't know whether it's be suitable or not. The from my trilogy, there's one character that is throughout the trilogy that doesn't particularly have his voice. So I've written a short story about his journey through the whole of the series, which works as a short story for that. Whether it'll suit your thing or not, I don't know. But Tyler's story is he's a robot.
Cool.
So it's the robot Tyler. It's his story. So that's interesting one.
So I will say to your readers, if they're thinking about submitting, 2 stories that I would recommend. One is by Kurt Vonnegut called Harrison Bergeron. It's a great story with some good ethical questions in it. Another one is by Ursula Le Guin, The Ones Who Walked Away from Omaha, is also a great story. Both of those would be really good examples of the kind of things we'd be interested in publishing.
Oh, that's perfect. And the link for those, the link with that will be in the description, so people can check that out. Excellent. Thanks, Kolby. Thanks for.
Hey, thank you.
Cheers.
You have a great day. Thanks for hosting me.